Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to this AFK journey video. So for those of you guys who just chance upon this video because you're looking out for content for AFK journey, welcome to the channel. For those of you guys who have been supporting me ever since I started releasing content videos for AFK journey, I really appreciate it as well. So I'm Zeeebo. I've been playing AFK journey for quite a while, ever since about 4 or 5 months back in the Pioneer testing server, and with AFK journey global server closely upon us, right, on the 27th of March. We're going to release a whole slew of content on the channel with regards to beginner's guide, tier list, like a bunch of advanced guides, hero reviews, as well as in-depth analysis with regards to the different aspects of the game. So if you guys are interested in all those contents, if you guys like what you guys see today, do remember to drop a like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. And with that, let us begin today's video. Let's go. Okay, hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to yet another AFK journey video. So in this AFK journey video, we are going to continue our tier list coverage for the different sources. Right, so these are the accurate sources which I can list out for you guys. You guys can follow, invest in these units, and they are gonna ensure you have a smooth gameplay experience. So today's tier list will be covering Prydwen's tier list. I really like how they arrange the units, the tier list. I think it's very beginner friendly. If you take a glance at the unit itself, you actually can tell, you know, the units are like, oh, in this tier. So I like how they present it graphically, and they also have a table mode which has everything. I think this is a little bit harder and a little bit more intimidating for beginners, so I'll be using the pyramid mode. And they also have a list of tier list criteria, which I'll leave it on screen, not gonna read it out. But for today's video, I'll be covering this tier list strictly on the PvE side, so story, early, mid, and late. Generally, they're accurate. I'm just gonna talk about a little bit as to why the units are there and how the unit will perform moving forward, and share their ratings on this tier list itself. So try my best to interpret. Might not be 100% accurate. Sometimes I don't understand like different writers or different tier list sources, right, their own understanding of the game. So try my best on that, but this is their criteria, right? Hopefully you guys have read it. Let us move on to the tier list rating. So like I mentioned, I'll cover the early, mid, and late, and I'll talk about the different units, why they are there at the different stages of the game. So damage dealer, specialist, support, and tank. So damage dealer is obviously your DPS. Specialist is more so like a buffer, debuffer type of character. Support is obviously your healer, debuffer, or like whatever buff you can do. Specialist also has this ability to reposition stun at time as well, so a little bit of CC. Personally, I usually just group the specialist and support together. I call them the support plus utility class. Then we obviously your tank, pretty straightforward unit that stands on the front line to absorb damage and draw attention away. So let's start with the lowest tier early game: Lumon, Kruger, Salazzo, and Atalanta. So these units, they are generally weaker early game because their kit is just not that good in the early game, right? Lumon is a tank which wants to do damage, so he doesn't tank as well. So from tank perspective, this is just not good a character. Then for Kruger's case, Kruger is more so a Dream Realm character. In my tier list, he's a generally meta character because even though he sucks everywhere else, he's one of the best characters for Dream Realm, and Dream Realm is one of the most important game modes. So that's why he is generally meta. But in general, Kruger is just not a story mode or PvE type of character because his kit doesn't make him extremely tanky, and his single target debuff is just not as good in a team fight setting. So that's why Kruger is here. Salazzo, mentioned by me as well, just generally a kit which doesn't shine as well, and he doesn't have any defensive capability, so he dies really easily before he even does anything. So deserving of a C tier. Atalanta, weird repositioning ability. In fact, right, I think all of these units in terms of the mid and late progression, yeah, you're gonna see them pretty consistently. So Atalanta, Salazzo, Kruger, and Lumon, they are generally not a good PvE character because their kit is not really meant for PvE, or like their kit is kind of like a trying to do a little bit of everything, but you just have better unit in those things that they're trying to do. So that's why they're here. And then for the early game support slash utility side, we have Damien. We'll start with the healer first. We have Damien, we have Faye, and we have Niru. So for Damien, Faye, and Niru, right, these three units, Faye is the unit that remains relatively weak throughout as well. So Faye is one of the worst healer, not because she's bad per se. Like personally, I think Faye's kit is decent, but in the healers portion, you just have a lot of really powerful guys out there, unfortunately. So Faye is just outclassed by all of them. If you take a look at like all the units above, they're all like really good early to late game characters, so Faye just doesn't scale compared to them. I think the only reason why she's in B tier is because you get early game shots for her, so she has a little bit of stats advantage. For Nero's case and Damien's case, they are units which scales off with stats. What they want to do scales off stats. So their early game is not as strong because units are generally lower in terms of stats, so they don't benefit as much. But as you go into the late game, this unit scales a lot of their stats and they become really powerful, especially Damien's case in the various game modes. For the specialist class, we have Iron, Cassidy, and Caroline. So for the first three on top, right, Caroline, Cassidy, and Iron, they are the units which I put at 0 to hero, because these units, if you take a look at the late game, right, Caroline and Iron and Cassidy, they become really powerful late game characters because this unit at the early game doesn't unlock their EX weapon. So their EX weapon is a major game changer for these units. So remember them, Caroline, Cassidy, and Iron, because their damage potential or their control potential or whatever they want to do scales off their EX weapon. So for Iron's case, it's his AoE control, AoE debuff. For Caroline's case, it's just massive damage potential output. For Cassidy's case, massive damage potential output and a little bit of control. That's why she's in specialist. But that's for the 3 0 to hero character in my tier list. So in early game, they are pretty low, B tier over here. For Khafra, Parisa, as well as Santandra, personally, I think Khafra is a character that is deserving of a B tier throughout. But in their tier list, right, if you take a look at their tier list, Khafra actually gets a little bit better in the mid game, and he gets the same treatment in the late game as well. So this Owlman over here, I personally think he's not really good because of 2 reasons. So in their tier list, Khafra is a niche damage dealer, healer, and debuffer, which have a little bit of everything. And yes, I agree. I think Khafra is this jack of all trade character that can do a little bit of everything. And I can see him being used in really niche situations. If you really need to snipe off certain targets, I do think that he's good. But the issue with Khafra is that he's in a Wilders faction. So some of the most powerful Wilders unit, as you guys can see on top, right, they're all mage based. And usually if you build Wilders, you'll be building towards the mage side to begin with, because like units like Arden, units like Damien, Iron, units like Brian, they're all damage dealers. And wow, their most powerful ace, Iron, right, is a mage side support. So Khafra is sort of, I would say, a physical side of things. So he doesn't really fully benefit from the strengths of Wilders. And from a team building perspective, I personally can't see him being good. But if you want to see him as a standalone unit, I can agree with their tier list. So they did give him all the way to A tier, like means he have a little bit of improvement. But personally for me, I think Khafra should be slightly lower in the tier rating itself. So should be slightly lower to B tier all around. But I do agree with the rest. Santandra, Parisa, and Khafra. Okay, so we talk about Parisa and Santandra. I think the issue with them is Santandra is just way too niche. Anti-mage teams and Mauler has a bunch of other sick units out there, so really good low rating. And if you move forward in the different game modes, I think she falls off as well, because yeah, her kit is not really that versatile for PvE, because you don't really need her specifically to even counter mage teams. So her niche, there's one place you can use her, but I'll save that for the arena video because that's where she might shine. But yeah, generally just a very weak PvE characters. Then for Parisa's case, a little bit like Khafra, like I think her buff benefits more so for the physical team more than mage teams, although her buff is useful as well. But the other issue with Parisa is also her ultimate being really slow. So in PvE's context, most of the time you are understated, so you are battling teams and enemies that are much stronger than you. So this unit is a little bit too slow for some of these situations. That's why she's here. So if you take a look at the mid side, right, she's still B tier. If you take a look at the late game side, she's still going to be B tier. So I think there is a place for her, but she's just a little slow compared to like some of the really powerful characters moving forward, and I do agree with her placing. Then for the DPS side in early game, we have Arden, Beryl, Mirel, and Seth. Okay, so for Beryl's case, let's put it straight. Over here in the Prydwen's tier list, right? Let me just do a quick tap. For Prydwen's tier list, Beryl is increasingly more powerful characters in the PvE side. I agree, because Beryl is more of the main antagonist group from the Hippojin side of things. He's gonna be really expensive to invest in, by the way. So this unit, if you do invest in him, it's more PvP centric. You're not going to invest in him from a PvE side. Yes, if you do invest in him, you can use him for your PvE contents, obviously, but just take note that he's expensive, more expensive than your standard S tier, and more arena centric. So even though he's an A tier in PvE, I'll say that, yeah, you're not going to invest in Beryl just for PvE stuff. So I could give him higher, but just know that don't invest him if you are going to go PvE side of the game. That's all. Okay, so that's for Beryl. Then we have Arden, Mirel, and Seth. So I'll start with the pretty lady Mirel first. So for Mirel's rating in the mid game, she's still gonna be pretty meh, and for the late game, she's also pretty meh. So the reason why Mirel is meh throughout is because she has massive damage potential, she has massive AoE potential, and her kit is really like full out damage centric. But I think the main issue with Mirel is that, number one, her whole kit is very slow. Ultimate takes too much energy, attack speed is a little slow, her attack range is a little short, so she needs some time to reposition herself. So if she's able to get a little bit of speed support for her kit, she might be a little bit better. But at where she is right now, just simply too slow, and you just have way better units out there. Then for Seth's case is one of the 0 to hero unit in my tier list, and even in Prydwen's PvE tier list, Seth goes from B tier to A tier and subsequently to S tier. So the reason for this growing increase for Seth is because Seth is a stat scaling character. So he just scales off a lot of stats and his kit becomes more powerful over time. Not going to cover too in depth because for all these units, I will cover a specific unit overview. But for Seth's case, PvE wise, he'll just get stronger with time, and he's a good late game investment for PvE's sake. And for PvP, also really good. So generally a quite well-rounded character. And then for Arden's case, same thing with Seth. So B here, right? A here, and then S here. So for Arden's case, slightly different from Seth. Arden benefits from the late game team synergy that you can build around. He is a more control centric character, and his skill benefits greatly from him being a control team because he's able to regenerate energy from controlled enemies, which speeds up his ultimate for more damage. So early game wise, he's gonna seem really weak, but he's a growing type character similar to Seth. Really good investment if you're looking at him from a PvE perspective. So next one, right, we move on to the A tiers. So okay, I'm gonna put it straight. I think I will have a little bit of disagreement for the tanks portion because we will start with Lucius and Tendra. For Lucius, he's A tier here. He falls off in terms of their tier list, goes to B tier, and then later on to B tier in the late game. But I have to sort of speak up for Lucius. The reason why Lucius falls off is because I feel, right, is because the good tanks are just way too good. Like Torrent is just way too good. I think Granny is also way too good. And in comparison, I think Lucius just pales in comparison. But as a tank unit, Lucius does his job really well. He shields your whole team, he heals your team, he taunts, he's able to reduce attack of all enemies. But he just doesn't shine compared to some of the beasts on top, right? So he's here. But I feel that if you want to be slightly more lenient, if you want to just grade a unit based on what they do, I do think that Lucius deserves a straight A. He's just a very decent tank all around, but decent, just not good. So a little bit underrated, I'll say, for Lucius' case. If you want to invest in him as a tank, as a Lightbringer tank, you can, but just know that in the tank portion, you have some of the really powerful beasts, right? And for Antendra's case, I think Antendra starts off really weak, right, at the A tier. Not even that weak, but she also scales off stats because Antendra has a shielding ability which gives additional shield for your front line. So she acts more like a secondary tank because you technically want a really powerful unit on the front line that you want to be shielded, and then Antendra benefits from the shield because the shield value is based off the ally's HP. So the more HP the ally have, the more shield she generate, and she's able to protect herself as well as the ally better, and that's why she scales off stats. And she also has damage reduction ability, the ability to taunt your enemies and then recover HP from there. Really good tank all around, a growing type of tank. So pretty good investment if you don't have Granny or Torrent, or you don't plan to invest in them. But since I'm on the topic of tanks, I'm just going to finish the tier list. I'm just going to talk about all the tanks first because they don't have a lot, and tank portion is quite skewed in the case. Two of the best tanks, they are just really good from the start to the end, and the rest of the other tanks just don't seem so good. So let's continue with the S tier tank and the S plus tier tank first before I move on to the other category. So for Brutus' case, Brutus is a really good early game character because he has the 5-second inbound. So 5-second inbound most of the time is enough to buy your backline enough energy to use their ultimate, buy enough time for your backline to do whatever they want to do. But this unit falls off in the tanking compartment because his EX weapon is not very spectacular, and on top of that, 5 seconds simply just isn't enough in the late game, or he doesn't offer much for the team setting. So even if he can survive 5 seconds, your backline can't survive 5 seconds, so he's not really that good as a tank character. In fact, this character is not even a tank, he's a warrior. So a warrior that doesn't do that much damage, and a warrior that wants to tank but doesn't protect the team well enough compared to the standard tank builds. So that's why our dear Brutus is S tier here, but falls off eventually to the B tier in the late game. So next, we continue with two of the strongest tanks in the game. We have Granny Danny, and then we have Torrent. Torrent, hands down strongest tank in the game. One of the top tier reroll targets that everyone should go for. If you're planning to reroll, Torrent is the one you should aim for because this unit serves you really well in whatever game mode he's in. I'm gonna say this again, it's just way too good, which makes every other tank pales in comparison. But that being said, why is this unit good? This unit has a revive skill, multiple lives. This unit has a debuff skill, which makes the enemy takes more damage. This unit has an ultimate which stores damage that he takes and then performs a reverse attack, which makes him a pretty decent cheeser in terms of PvE contents as well. So that's why this guy is the king of tanks, the best tank, S tier or S plus tier throughout, right? Story mid game S plus tier, story late game S plus tier. So next we have the other S level tank, Granny. I feel that Granny is, like I mentioned earlier, she's put into this position because Torrent is just way above the league in terms of the tank compartment. But I think Granny can be deserving for S plus tier in the late game because Granny is also a very standard tank. Taunt, heal, AoE control, as well as the ability to continuously disrupt your enemy backline with her ability itself. So she does a tank job really well. And in the late game, as a healing number increase, as her control numbers and duration increase, she becomes a really annoying tank, and she's gonna scale up in terms of usage. She's gonna be really helpful for the different game modes where you need a very disruptive tank that can absorb damage, that can soak damage. So the reason why I say she can be quite deserving of the S plus tier is because in the late game, the Wilders faction is gonna be quite powerful from the control compartment, and Granny actually does her job as a control unit very well there as well. So she can definitely go up, but I do agree that Torrent is just slightly above the league, and that's for the tank compartment. So Torrent, one of the best tank if you want to reroll for him. Just for PvE side, she's gonna be just really good early, mid to late. And for Granny, also a generally good early, mid to late character, and on top of that you can get her shots from the Emperor shop itself. So that's one strength that Granny has. And let us continue back into the other categories. So okay, I tell you what, I figured I'll just speak about each tier and just group them all together. I think it's easier to explain why these units are in this tier. As for the lousy units, I already explained why they're lousy already, so let's talk about the good ones, right? So we start with the support side. We have Coco, we have Smokey and Murky, Herwin, Rainer, and Rowan. The reason the reason why these units are good, let's put it this way. If you take a look at their rating, right, this unit becomes better over time, or they just generally stays good over time, is because their kit scales with stats, and their kit is just really what you need as a support. Having AoE healer no matter where you go, AoE dispeller, damage reduction once you unlock the EX weapon, one of the best supportive capabilities that you can ask for. Reina, really powerful support, disruptive unit that can reposition enemies, that can win you the game, right? The ability to take out key targets and then just sniping them off is really precious. And on top of that, his single target buff for the various compartment is one of the best unit out there. So very deserving of the S+ tier throughout. So these two units, they are generally really good. Herwin more so for the PvE side. Reina, one of the best character in the game. So that's for the support. Then for Rowan and Smokey, I usually just classify them in the same tier, whether or not it's S+ or S tier, because I feel that they are also generally good. They do their job really well. They provide energy manipulation, they provide haste, they provide buff, they provide heal. So the difference in my tier list, I put Smokey in the same category as Harry, generally meta. And in my heart, I think Smokey is in general a really like versatile unit as well, because different from Herwin is a full defensive support. Smokey is an offensive support that provides buff as well as attack and haste for your team. So his offensive capability, because his ultimate, this like Fart Cloud, also does damage. So Smokey is a better support offensively compared to Herwin, but Herwin is definitely the better healer throughout, because her heal numbers as well as her supporting capability is a lot better. So if you compare them in that perspective, I can agree that Herwin is slightly S+, but as a unit per se, I will group them together because they just do different things, but and they do different things really well. So it depends on what you need in what situation. Each of them could be better. For Rowan's case, also a really good general unit, because Rowan's energy manipulation is just really unique. He's the only one in the game that can allow your units to just cycle through their skills faster, and his potion is really good for early game content pushing, because the potion is based off the HP of the ally. So let's say if you're running Brutus, right, you get a 5-second inbound, Brutus drops to like 2% HP and then he just doesn't die. Then Rowan walks up to him, serves him a potion, he recovers 65% of his HP. So yeah, you can imagine that, right? Like, then you have 65% HP Brutus standing on the front line, and then he's gonna soak more damage for your back line. So that's where Rowan is good. Generally, I'll also put him in the S+ here throughout, because you just don't have a unit that can replace what he do. So it's very unique. It's just that I feel the reason why he slightly dropped off is probably because Lightbringers are really powerful in the late game, as you guys can see. So I mean Graveborn, right? Caroline, Igor, Ciccia, Torrent, Viperian, Sylvina, they are all really powerful late game characters. So Rowan will fall off a little bit. So I can understand why they put this unit slightly lower, but I'll say he's a good unit. Then for Koka's case, Koka is also generally really good, like A tier, S tier, S tier. To me, I feel that all these support, they are generally really good. Like, it doesn't really matter whether or not they're A tier or S tier, because they do their job decently well. As long as they're not in the B tier and below, I think they're fine. Like for Coco's case, right, this unit has an AoE shielding ability, which causes your whole team to take lesser damage from the damage reduction, gains lifesteal, which makes them tankier, survive longer, and gives them a little bit of attack. And on top of that, if you do get her EX weapon, Fluffy Shield, like if you have the ultimate full energy active, as your team is surviving the barrages of damage from the enemy side, they're also dealing damage. So this damage that they deal will be converted into the shield, which provides even more survivability for your whole team. So I'll say Koka scales with stats, scales into the late game, and she's generally deserving of the tier rating that they give her. So the next unit, which I'm gonna talk about, right, is Damien, and I'm also just gonna talk about Nero briefly. So Nero and Damien, like I mentioned, they scale off with stats. So in the late game, you guys can see that their ratings are a little bit higher. I think Nero can go into S tier as well, because in the Graveborn side, you do have a lot of support. So if you were to rank the support from the Graveborn side, I think Nero can be in the S tier. The heal numbers that he provides, as well as the spirit ability that he provides for the team, is quite optimal with more stats. So that's that. But I usually see them in the same tier, but for their tier, they group Damien in the S tier, very good late game, and New in the A tier, which is good, not the best, but good enough. So not gonna dispute on that. So generally for support characters, as long as it's not Faye, they are generally okay. Like generally okay. The better one is obviously Heron, Rainer, Smokey, and Rowan, but the others are usable, and Damien scales off with stats, which makes him a lot better in the late game, and that's for the support class. So next we continue the specialist class. Okay, if I look at this, right, I tell you I disagree with the Walker's positioning. Okay, so we take a look at the tier list. They gave Walker an A tier and he fall into B tier. Dude, Walker is one of the worst character in the game. He has a tier for himself. I'm not gonna explain why. He's just bad. He's just bad. I'm not gonna talk too much. I don't agree with the A tier here. Prydwen, I don't agree. He's not good. He's a Walker tier by himself. Don't mislead the beginners. so for this unit, right? Yeah, just don't invest in him. He's so bad. So bad. Okay, so I mean the late game part. I mean, you can even put him in the C tier, and I don't disagree. Like, he's just so bad. He has a little bit of everything, but like, yeah, why invest in him when you have other better units you can invest out there? So, we take a look at the A tier other than Walker. I'm not going to acknowledge Walker in the A tier. Igor, Skalita, Shakir, and Tamasia. Skills of stats. These 4 units, they scale stats. So Igor is an annoying tank that jumps around. So the more HP you have, the more annoying he have, the harder it is for you to kill him. And he's gonna bounce around, charge his energy, use his AoE ultimate to deal damage. So this unit goes from A tier to S tier to S plus tier, because like I mentioned, the more HP you have, the longer he's gonna be an annoyance, and he's gonna do what he do for a really long time if you don't have any answers for him. So very deserving of the tier rating. And then Skalita, it's a late game messiah character, very expensive, similar to Barrow. Her gimmick is she can actually shield the ally when she's in the sky, and her shield numbers are decent enough. If you get her to Supreme Plus, she's able to provide a defensive buff, which keeps your team alive longer. So when she's in the air, she's not only protecting your ally, she's also charging up her offensive prowess. So she will then jump down, right? Then she will use her skill, then use her ultimate to do damage. And if you have an EX weapon unlocked, she's gonna do insta killing stuff. Like she's gonna be knocking enemies flying all around. So very late game centric character. So A tier here, S tier here, and S tier over here. I do agree, and pretty powerful all around unit. Like she does a little bit of everything, but I don't think she's S plus tier, definitely, because you need quite a lot of investment to make her a god. That's why I call her the late game messiah. Like if you get her to Supreme Plus, if you get her EX weapon like really high up, wow, you will see a difference. Like that's just Skalita, right? Then Shakir, same thing. Shakir has the ability to transform into his wolf form, which gives him damage reduction, gives him AoE damage. So he can act as like a semi-tanker, semi-damage leader, anti-control type of character. And obviously this type of character, the more stats they have, the more the longer they will stay alive to do what they need to do, and that's why his tier rating also increases. Similar to Shakir, Tamasia is also like a very disruptive unit. So for Tamasia's case, she's a tank that's able to run around on her horse and then do mini stun, do damage from there. And obviously with more stats, she's gonna be more annoying. She's gonna stay around for longer, and she's able to annoy the hell out of your enemies in the PvE setting the longer she's around. So that's why her rating increases from A tier all the way to S tier. I agree totally. Really good character. So for Iron, Carolina, as well as Cassidy, I already mentioned, not going to talk too much about them. As for the Fallen from Grace, okay, let's talk about Laika. So Laika is one of my very first early game character that I maxed out in one of my first playthrough. I don't know why. Like, Laika feels really powerful in the early game because Laika has an attack speed buff, has a haste buff for the team, and she has a defense debuff in the ultimate, which is also an AoE damage skill. Right, so she has attack speed, has energy, and then she has reduced physical defense, additional damage. And if you take a look at her kit, right, it feels like she's a really versatile and well-rounded unit. And if you look at her kit, you also feel that, hey, attack speed is quite good, right? And it's attack speed for the whole team. But I just don't know why. Like, this unit somehow just falls off in the PvE content. Like, he's still S tier in the mid game, but in the late game drops off to A tier. I think she's still usable, but I attribute this to mainly the same issue with Khafra. Like, Wilder's side, they're just really strong in the mage side. So if you take a look at the story late game, right? Arden, mage. Brian, magical attack archer. Iron, magical attack assassin. Damien, magical attack support. Okay, then Danny is a physical attacker, but then she's a tank, so you don't really care so much to build around her. So you can see, like, some of the best Wilders unit, they're all magical based. So yes, as much as Laika provides a lot for the team, she is not that good in the Wilders team, so she falls off. But without a doubt, I think she's still one of the most like versatile character all around. I think in the future, if you get more physical support for the Wilders team, or you get more support or units which will benefit from her buff, making them really powerful, example, more Donnell type of characters, then Laika could actually rise up in terms of the tier rating. But I do agree with their tier rating in terms of the PvE side. SS to A, she falls off quite a bit in the late game. I also don't know why. Like, she has a lot going for her, right? If you take a look at her kit, but it's just, yeah, she just don't see a lot of use in the late game. So that's for Laika's case. So that's it for the specialist. So the Carolina and Aaron, already talk about them. Really powerful late game. Cassidy, same thing. So lastly, we will finish off the tier list with the damage dealers. Okay, for the damage dealers, right, I'm not gonna focus too much in the early game. I'm just gonna jump into the mid to late game, because damage dealers are units which you will generally focus your resources on, so they actually reach the later part or the mid to late game part faster. So in this list, I'm gonna specifically point out our dear boy Valen. So Valen is a S tier here. Really good. Wow, AoE damage really good. Then he's gonna do like all his Omni slash shenanigans. But look at where he is in the late game. So he's like the 0 to hero in my tier list. And that's because for Valen's case, right, I'm gonna give him a special mention, because for Valen's case, he gets quite a bit of shards from the tutorial. So you can upgrade him from the lowest tier to the legendary plus tier pretty quickly, right? If you do some gacha pulls on him. So with those hit stats that he get, he can do decent damage. But he's the prime example of the Celezo slash warrior problem, because he's also a unit without any form of defensive capabilities. So before she even uses his ultimate, he might just die off. And that's why he's S tier here, and he falls off tremendously in terms of usage, because he's the prime example of hero to 0. So that's for Valen. We take a look at the other units in the A tier. So Sylvina's case, generally really good backline sniper character. Very powerful targeting, because he's one of those characters which benefits from you having the offensive positioning power. So what do I mean by that? Basically, you can choose where you want to put her. You can choose the target that you want to go after. So units which benefits a lot is Sylvina as well as Vala, because these units, they target specific enemies at the start of the battle, so they can snipe off key targets from the PvE computer side. So in the late game, you can see that Vala is still really good, Sylvina is still really good, and the reason is that, right, they also scale with stats. Their kit builds a lot of damage, a lot of disruption. So being able to pick off key targets in Sylvina's case as well as Vala's case make them really good. But the reason why Vala is slightly higher throughout is because Vala's damage is just a lot higher, and if Vala steams roll, she steams roll way harder than Sylvina, because she can buff her own attack. She becomes very hard to deal with, and she's just a really powerful all-around Lightbringer character, one of the more powerful ones around. So that's for Vala. But what Vala want to do as well as what Sylvina want to do is very similar. They both want to snipe off enemy key units as fast as possible, and you can do so pretty easily with them because they have specific targeting. So that's for Vala and Sylvina. Then we have Rice. Rice is just a very generally decent AoE damage dealer. I don't think there's too much to say about him, right? The A tier, and A tier, yeah, just generally good. Like I think generally this unit is just yeah, I don't know what more to say about him. Just an AoE damage dealer. and deals good damage. That's all. I think more experimentation can be done. I don't think a lot of people are trying this unit out. Does have some good potential, but he doesn't have any gimmick that makes him excel, at least in the PvE side from what I see. So yeah, quite deserving of the A tier. Then we have Merrily. Okay, so for Merrily's case, I kind of disagree with their rating, unfortunately. This one, I mean, other than Walker is obviously a tier of his own, but Merrily's case, I do think that the later you go with Merrily, the more she scales though, because her EX weapon is so bonkers. Like the damage buff that she can get as well as the true damage. Even though Merrily have a really major drawback in her kit, and that is she just jumps randomly with her ultimate. But if you take a look at her damage numbers, she actually served pretty well as a carry if you actually build her up. And you will have to actually build her up for Dream Realm purposes anyway. So I run Merrily on my second account playthrough as my main carry, and I personally think that she's a unit that scales. So I agree with the A tier here, but in the mid stage, I would say she's close to S tier, and even in the late game, I might even put her in the S tier because she's a scaling type of character. Although her biggest drawback, like I mentioned, is that she jumps randomly. So in stages where you cannot control where she go, she can be a little bit haywire. But in PvE game mode, especially AFK stages, as well as your open world exploration, you can manual the game mode. So I don't see the manualing as a big drawback, and I do think Merrily deserves higher, in fact. S tier at least, even S plus tier if you are really good with, you know, what you do and you know what you're doing with her. So that's my thought about Merrily. Just one of the disagreement I have, other than Walker obviously. But yeah, Merrily is okay, very good character if you want to invest in her. Then we have Donnell. Okay, Donnell is Celestial / Shipojin. This group of character, they are mostly late game scaling, and for Donnell's case, if you can build a team around him, I think he's quite bonkers. But I think for most people, Celestial and Hippojin, the topmost priority will be Reyna. And if you want a generally more versatile and easier to build around unit, it will be Skalita. So for Donnell's case, if you want to invest in him, I think he's a good damage dealer. But you have a lot of other cheaper options, right? As you guys can see, you have Odal, you have Brian, you have Merrily, you have Vala, you have Cisia. Okay, Cicia's case, I'm going to talk about it later. But that's for the rating for Donnell. I agree with it. A, S, and S+, generally pretty good. Just a little bit team specific for team building, and a little bit more expensive compared to some of the carries on this list. So that's for A tier. Merrily is the only one which I feel that she can also scale into the late game. Then we go into the S tier. Brian, Corrin, Odal, as well as Viperion. Okay, so Brian and Corrin, they're just generally really good damage dealer. Like, they do a lot of damage. Brian's really good against Waveborn, has a stun, has a little of AoE damage, has a lot of burst from the ultimate. Viperion also just a very generally good mage character that deals AoE damage, energy reduction, just very disruptive, allows your team to use their ultimate faster because the Vipers reduces energy of the enemy, and very good for PvE contents from the early to late game. Same thing for Corrin, right? All these characters, they're all S tier throughout. So for Corrin's case, Corrin is the better version for Valen. I would say Corrin to a certain extent is also a growing type character because he has this shielding potential, and this shield numbers scales off his stats. So I agree. I think if they choose to put him in S tier, I can agree. But I'll say he's more of a scaling. In the early game, slightly weaker, but yeah, definitely usable. One of the better Lightbringer character, and very well-rounded character. You can use him in a lot of game mode. Then we have the third unit, Odal. So Odal's case, yeah, I think Odal in the early game is not as strong. Okay, first of all, I'm a big fan of Odal, by the way. In all my tier lists, I generally think that Odal is just a really versatile character. But I do agree when people say that he's not like the best in the early game, because his single damage target potential, right, is not the best in the early game if your team is weak, because his single target comes from the ultimate. So his early game doesn't have any way to accelerate his ultimate usage, so it comes a little bit slower and he will appear a little bit weaker. His insta killing comes at the EX, So you're not gonna see him throw ultimate Q an enemy, then throw another ultimate Q another enemy. And his energy cycling ability for his ultimate also comes in at a much later level. So we're just gonna take a look at his kit. So his kit fires corrosive dart, deals damage to enemy, poison target receive 30% damage per second, right? Until they're defeated. And Odal gains 600 energy when a poison enemy is defeated, but only 200 energy if the enemy is a summon unit. So this is what I mean by the energy cycling. What Odal wants to do is he wants to throw his ultimate, Q an enemy, gain energy, and then throw the ultimate at another target. And because the poison basically sticks with the target from the start to the end, right? He's just an amazing single target unit. So you can see that he's S here, S plus here, and S plus. In fact, he's S++ in the late game because he gets his insta killing ability in the EX weapon. So Heart Crusher immediately defeats poison enemy when their HP falls below a certain limit, 5.2 times of the base damage, and obviously EX10 gives him this 600 initial energy. So you can see where I'm going. He's gonna start his battle with more energy. He's gonna throw his ultimate, he's gonna start steamrolling, start killing enemies, start insta-killing them, and he's just generally a really good character to invest in. So that's for Odal. So sorry about that. So we have come to the last unit of this PvE tier list by Prydwen. Right, I already covered Vala, very similar to Sylvana, but just generally a more versatile version, just a stronger version. For Cicia's case, I'm gonna say this. I agree with their tier list rating. So Cicia is an S+ here, S+ here, and S+ here because, right? Because Cicia's story potential is good when you can summon her ultimate, right? So some people might have seen my previous tier list and they might be asking, hey Zeeebo, like I saw Cicia being S+ in people's tier list. I saw Cicia being really good in other people's tier list. Why is she just decent in your tier list? The reason is because Cicia is a unit where her ultimate matters a lot. And her ultimate actually takes quite a while to charge up. In a PvE setting, you can create a team, you can create a situation where you get her ultimate up multiple times in fact, and you can see why she's strong there. I strongly encourage people to use her because she's a guaranteed copy anyway, really good for your content pushing, and you being able to use her ultimate in manual means that you can abuse the AoE route that her summons can provide. So that's one thing that I have to give credit to Cicia for. But the reason why Cicia is just a decent unit in my tier list is because she's a unit that doesn't scale that well into the late game. Because in the late game everything just goes so fast, you might not be able to buy time for your team, you might not be able to buy time for Cicia to do anything, and she falls off from there. But if I base it on the story or the PvE tier list, I agree, like Cicia is quite good in story related contents. As long as you can buy enough time for her to use her ultimate, she will definitely do her job well there. So that's my evaluation for Cicia, at least in the PvE side. Generally very powerful, but a decent unit in my eye, because in the late game I don't use her a lot, and I'm pretty sure most of you guys will stop using her once you're done with the AFK stages. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tier list. Overall, I really agree with their tier list. Very nicely done, very accurate, very beginner friendly. I'll link up this tier list in my description down below. You guys can visit it for yourself and just have as much information as possible so you can make a clear and sound decision. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do remember to like and subscribe in order to see more videos from this channel, and I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.